Thank you, everybody, for joining us. That was Ellie Pepper, the Deputy Director of the National Housing Resource Center, and I'm Bruce Dorr-Palin, the Director. Very glad to have everybody here. I think we've got a jam-packed agenda. We're going to cover a lot of ground. You should have received the agenda already, so I think we're going to skip through that quickly. And what we'd like to do is move on to welcome note by David Berenbaum, very well known in our world as the Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Housing. David, welcome.
Thank you, Bruce and Ellie, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to kick the meeting off by first expressing my appreciation to the National Housing Resource Center for convening this important discussion to leverage the strength and the expertise of our nation's HUD-approved housing counseling organizations, and of course, our professional HUD-certified housing counselors to ensure and expand the use of the Housing Choice Homeownership Initiative. The program squarely aligns with HUD's commitment to housing equity across the nation and to educate first-time and first-generation homebuyers so that we can bridge the homeownership gap. The Housing Choice Voucher or Homeownership program allows families that are assisted under the HCV program to use their voucher to buy a home and to receive monthly assistance in meeting homeownership expenses. The program is limited to first-time homeowners who have received housing counseling and meet the minimum income requirements. All public housing authorities that administer the HCV program have the option to establish an HCV homeownership program in their own community, and it represents a wonderful opportunity for HUD-approved housing counseling agencies to provide both pre- and post-purchase housing counseling direct services with their public and private sector partners to first-time and first-generation homeowners. Significantly, the law requires that housing counseling under the program be provided in connection with all HUD programs by HUD-certified housing counselors. This statutory requirement was implemented by HUD through the final rule for housing counseling certification. Public housing authorities are not required to become approved to participate in the program, nor is the PHA staff required to become HUD certified, but the PHA must provide the homeownership and housing counseling through HUD certified housing counseling organizations. This is a very significant requirement, and it celebrates the best-in-class role of HUD certified organizations across the nation. I want to share with you as well as we start that the focus of our National Make Home Goal Housing Counseling Awareness campaign in the coming year will be to reach over 8 million prospective home buyers in over 40 markets nationwide. And in fact, it should closely align with our efforts to expand the use of the Choice Voucher program. Additionally, we're going to be having social media placement and ads on major websites such as the Google web search engine, Reddit, as well as forthcoming announcements with regard to major real estate sites across the nation. Our hope is that not only will we elevate public awareness about the profession, but that will also drive prospective homebuyers to you so that they can learn more about the Housing Choice Voucher program and, of course, FHA, community lending, and special purpose mortgage programs. The impact of all these initiatives will be amplified by the Comprehensive Housing Counseling Grant Program and, of course, our new Homeownership Initiative Grant Program, and as well, direct fee-for-service support from HUD's public and private sector partners, such as the many lenders that we work with in concert across the country. I want to, in closing, thank you for allowing me to join you today. I hope that you have a very informed conversation, and our office is committing to support both NHRC and all of our agencies, as well as working with our Office of Public and Indian Housing, as well as other offices here at HUD to ensure the successful launch of your programs in this space. Forgive me, I'm going to drop off now because today is the 90th anniversary of the HUD FHA mortgage program, and I have to join a program here in the Weaver building. Have a great discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. Good luck with your meeting. We're going to dive in. So we're here because of the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Homeownership Program. And we're going to do a deep dive into it. I'm going to touch on some of the most basic elements, but we have a team of experts that are going to, over the next 2 hours, walk through the program. One quick note, we understand that there are a number of people who are new to the National Housing Resource Center coming on the call. So if you're affiliated with a housing counseling agency or deeply connected to one, we have a listserv for housing counselors, and it's filled with information. It's a regular update on advocacy issues. We sponsor 20 plus webinars every year on the fundamental issues around credit, around loss mitigation, around we just did one on undocumented workers. We did one on undocumented home buyers. We did one on modular housing, a broad range of the housing issues that affect your work. So we should have the link we'll put the link into the chat every once in a while, or we could just go to our website and get yourself signed up for that. We really do really want to be as connected as we can with you. We've got many outgoing projects that we're doing to help strengthen the housing counseling world and position it both among policymakers and in the field with lenders and programs. So we've been working on the Section 8 homeownership voucher program for quite a while, for 3 years now, starting next month. A number of you on the phone were part of our working committee that was 50 plus strong, that were really lobbying to get reforms, especially with HUD, but also in the field around getting the program to work more effectively. The opportunity is very big, and we have what we think is really a complete turnaround in making this work together. So first, you should know there are 2.3 million voucher holders, and almost all of them are renter holders. So it's a very valuable program. And yes, we would like to see it to be larger, but it is what it is. But anybody who has that voucher, a Section 8 voucher, could potentially also convert it to home ownership. And the same amount of the subsidy that would be paid towards the rent could be paid towards the mortgage payment. So lots of detail on how that works and who is eligible, but at the end of the day, we could make very low income people homeowners who are and done sustainably. So people making less than 50% of median income, they would be paying less than, they would be paying 30% or maybe a little bit more of their household income towards the house payment, and the rest can be paid for by the subsidy. So this is a really valuable tool, and we know about the deep issues there are about Black and Latino and other populations in the communities of color that are underserved and have a big gap in homeownership rates, big issue around wealth building in the United States. This is a vehicle to changing all that. And we are going to be a driving force to make that happen. And when I say we, I mean the housing counseling community, that there is a big opportunity. There's a change in culture, especially at HUD. There's excellent new leadership at HUD today that is very interested in this program and in promoting it, and have done significant changes. We'll have Claudia Brienza to talk about it in a moment. But the exciting thing here is that there's kind of a breath of fresh air. That means that there's greater flexibility and more opportunity. There's 600 plus housing counseling, public housing authorities around the country that are doing the program. More can sign up, and the task will be in each locality where you want this to move forward, figure out if, in fact, your PHA offers the program, and if not, would they start doing it? And if we can do this on a large scale, I said 2.3 million vouchers are out there. Less than 10,000 of those are actually home ownership vouchers. So less than 0.5% of all of them. And it's really been underused, and there's a broad recognition that this is a great opportunity. If we could just get to the point of 5%, we're talking about 100,000 new homeowners across the United States in a sustainable program, and they're low income. 61% of the people who are in the voucher program today are Black or Latino, so a big slice of the underserved populations. This is a great opportunity. We can change the lives of individuals. As we all know, homeownership is transformative, but we can also change the whole trajectory around wealth building and intergenerational wealth. If we do this right, we do this on scale. So this is kind of the big first step, this national gathering here. And we are moving forward to get to do a lot more from here. But let's start with the first steps. So I just want to say a few things that are just sort of baseline rules, so that you're familiar with the program. Everybody's on the same plane, and then we'll get to the experts. So the first thing is that the only people that are eligible for the homeownership voucher program are people who already have the Section 8 voucher. And so if you could, once you've been approved for the voucher, if you've got it in hand, you might already be renting a unit, or you might be on a waiting list but have an active voucher. That's the population that will be able to do the program. Participants must make less than 50% of the area median income, and they pay 30% of their income toward house payment and rent. That's PITI, so principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And with some housing authorities, there's some flexibility to include a little bit for utilities as well. And I should say that I think there's also some flexibility for the housing authorities to allow people to go a little bit above 30% if it gets them within the homeownership range. And and of course, beyond that, the voucher should cover the rest. The voucher amount itself is based on the fair market rents and family size, just like it would be for the apartment. And there's a standard payment that's paid. It's up to the PHA about how those are structured, and we'll talk about that as we go along on this call. And one of our experts will give you a little sense of some of the shadings on that. But the point is that that's the amount of voucher that's available. So affordability is essentially 30% plus as much as the voucher amount will allow for them to qualify for a mortgage. Obviously, down payment assistance is critical for this. Our population is not likely to have much in the way of savings. And it's also great housing counseling is critical to this. We know you've got that base covered. The way that voucher actually works is that it's a commitment for 15 years. If somebody has a 30-year mortgage or 20-year or longer mortgage. And if it's a shorter mortgage, then the commitment is for 10 years. So there is what we call a financial cliff at the end of 15 years for people who have a longer mortgage. These deals can be structured to do 20-year mortgages. That's the model that NACA has been using. Though very more typically, if they're 30-year mortgages, that's the kind of thing that you work out with the lender and the housing authority and the client. We are among the many reforms that we're trying to get, one of which is that the subsidy match the term of the loan. And that would require rule change, so that's not something that will happen immediately. So that's the kind of the broad range of the most basic elements, but we're going to go into a lot more detail now, and start with, of course, HUD. And one of our newfound friends in the department has been incredibly helpful and is really taking the lead nationally on HUD's role in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. On home ownership is Claudia Brienza. She's the Senior Housing Program Specialist. And in the Office of Public and Indian Housing, so PIH are the initials if they pop up. And we'll try to help you with the initials if they pop up. We try to encourage people not to use too many initials, but it is a HUD program. Okay, well, Claudia, welcome and glad to have you here.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I promise I was able to see myself on camera a few minutes ago. I'm not sure if I'm having technical difficulties, but I cannot see myself on screen. So bear with me. I hope you can hear me, but I guess we can just get started. All right, so my name's as Bruce said, my name's Claudia Brienza. I am a Senior Housing Program Specialist for the Housing Voucher Management and Operations Division at HUD, specifically at PIH, the Public Office of Public and Indian Housing. At the Housing Choice Voucher Management and Operations Division, we work on all things Housing Choice Voucher policy, including the Homeownership program. So today I'm going to go over the following topics. I have a little agenda here. I'm going to go over a high-level program overview about how the program works. Also talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that HUD that we've been working on. Next, we also hosted a homeownership convening for the top homeownership PHAs, and we got some pretty good feedback that I want to share with you today. I'm going to go over a map of where the concentration of the homeownership vouchers, that way you can see like a visual presentation of where those are. And you know, we're going to save the questions for the end of our session today. Next slide, please. Okay, so overview of the homeownership program. So you know, the Housing Choice Voucher Homeownership Program allows PHAs, like Bruce said, and like how David mentioned earlier, to make payments, monthly payments on behalf of low-income families to assist them with paying their mortgages, right? This is amazing. So the program is considered a special housing type under the PHA's regular voucher program. So special housing type is like a single room occupancy or a group home. There's no special contract needed between HUD and the PHA for homeownership vouchers. And you know, there are no special voucher allocations exclusively for homeownership vouchers. So any PHA has the capability of implementing a homeownership program as long as they already have a voucher program. And next is a homeownership voucher assistance is tenant-based. So what does that mean? That means that just like the rental voucher program, means that the families can select a home to purchase anywhere in the jurisdiction that the PHA covers. There are some exceptions, like the use of portability. So a family can choose to port out to a different part of the country and take advantage of homeownership opportunities at a different housing authority that already has the HCV homeownership program and is accepting new buyers. And lastly, the families that are already, so that, like Bruce said earlier, the families that qualify for this program are families that are already taking advantage and participating in the rental program. And this also includes new voucher holders that came fresh off the waiting list. They can immediately go into home ownership and they don't have to go through like the rental process first. They can immediately take advantage of using their home ownership assistance. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are some eligibility criteria that a family must adhere to when taking advantage of this program. So first, the family must meet the PHA's eligibility criteria and also be able to qualify for a mortgage loan. They must also complete the homeownership housing counseling program, which is why we're all here today to learn more about, right? And, you know, the PHAs really have a very huge and significant role in helping the families find and connect with lenders. You know, the stronger the partnership that the PHA can develop with lenders and other community activists and other organizations, the better they can support their buyers in the home buying process. So there's also some additional requirements when purchasing a home with a voucher. So some of these requirements include the following. The entire unit must be owner occupied. And also the home must be within the PHA's jurisdiction, except for, like I mentioned earlier, some exceptions if the family decides to port out to a different housing authority in a different part of the country. The home must pass 2 home inspections. So the first inspection is conducted by the PHA, and that is the Housing Quality Standards Inspection, or HQS inspection. That's usually, that is always conducted by the PHA. And then there's a second inspection, and that is your independent private inspection, and the family must hire an independent contractor for that, and that comes out of pocket. And another good thing is the buyer is not obligated to make any repairs to the home, before buying the property. And the last requirement is also that the seller may not have been debarred, suspended, or subject to any limited denial of participation. This holds true to all of our HUD programs. Anytime that we are engaging with stakeholders, we are always, making sure and requiring that there haven't been disbarred, suspended, and they don't have any limitations to the program to be able to participate. Next slide, please. Slide. Thank you. All right, so now I'm going to go over some of the HCB homeownership initiatives that we have been engaging in here at HUD, and it's been really fun to work on homeownership. It is a priority of this administration, so we're doing a lot to promote the program, to enhance it, and to hopefully get more vouchers and more folks to participate, and also bring in more PHAs to implement voucher programs. I'm sorry, not voucher programs, homeownership voucher programs. So one of the things that we're proud about and we are doing, and we accomplished, is we increased the administrative fee from $200 to $1,500 per closing. So last year, the fee for any time there was a homeownership closing and a buyer would get their home, the PHA would only receive $200. So we increased it. We increased it to $1,000 last fall, and then recently, within the last couple of months, we increased it to $1,500 per closing. So we are also funding a one-time $2,500 special fee for each newly created homeownership program at any PHA this calendar year. This is a very big increase. We implemented this one-time special fee last year, and at that time the fee was only $500. So this is a very incremental increase, and we are hoping that, I know that $2,500 in this economy may not go a very long way, but for some PHAs this might be very helpful, right? So another initiative that we recently launched was the Keys to Homeownership Committee. We formed this committee, and we focus on addressing the challenges and reducing barriers. What we do is we meet quarterly, and we've been getting a lot of feedback. We're engaging PHAs and other stakeholders who are interested in working with us here at HUD in elevating the program. And so this has been a really good initiative, and it's still growing. I'm going to show more later in my presentation. I will have an opportunity for you to reach out to us, and if you'd like to join. And then another initiative was we established an internal HUD homeownership working group. So we felt the need to come together, a group of us within our offices, and work together to identify opportunities for collaboration, how we can grow those collaborations, and how we can work together across different offices, including other stakeholders, to help revitalize the program, expand visibility, promote it, and provide more updated materials and communicate better with the public as to what we're doing. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So another fun thing that we have implemented are convenings. So we are planning a national convening, and this is going to be virtual. The reason why we wanted to host it virtual is because, you know, as you all know, the opportunity for more folks to be able to join and participate is greater. And then this is scheduled for the fall of 2024. More information will be available, and we'll distribute it to the NHRC so that we can include your membership. Some of the participants include HUD's Office of Housing Counseling, Office of Single Family Housing, of course, our friends here at NHRC, FHFA. We're also looking to include FHA to participate, PHAs, mortgage lenders, realtors, and many more. We also hosted a top homeownership PHA convening, and this was held back in March of this year. This is a really great opportunity for the top homeownership PHAs to come together and really share some insight with us as to what is working with the program, why are they being so successful, right? So we invited the PHAs that were identified as leaders in the homeownership space, and what they ranked among the top with the highest numbers of homeownership vouchers. So when we came together, we had a really robust conversation. They shared best practices, and they also shared challenges that were unique within their programs and within their space, and also what steps they took to overcome these challenges. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail. I'm going to provide a high-level overview of what these best practices were in the next upcoming slides. All right, so as I mentioned, we got a lot of really good PHA feedback. We will be providing more detailed feedback at our convening in the fall. Right now, I just want to give a high-level overview of what was discussed at this meeting so that you have an idea of what the PHAs that are having really great programs, what they're doing in order to make the program so successful. Okay, so the biggest take here I felt was staffing. So you all know it's no secret, staffing is challenging this day and age. So a lot of PHAs have expressed to us that they feel that with the homeownership program, they need a very big group of people working on it. They need a large staff working on homeownership. And what the feedback that we got from these PHAs is that that is not necessarily true. Program success is possible with a small in-house team. Some PHAs had FSS / homeownership coordinators that were the same person, wearing a couple of hats, but they were working and making things work in the way that they came together. And sometimes they would work closely together, or in some instances they were the same person. Also, we highlighted that community partnerships are key to success. You know, having partnerships with lenders, having those relationships, really strong community relationships with lenders, housing counselors, financial institutions is really key to have a successful program. So some of the feedback that we received was lending teams. Some PHAs had lending teams that included an originator, an underwriter, and a closer that had homeownership, HCB homeownership experience with mortgages. So that really helped to streamline the process. Housing counseling grants, they're taking advantage of those grants and becoming certified housing counselors. That way they have an in-house housing counselor, and it helps really when it comes to also post-purchase counseling, because they have a better way of tracking the buyers that are already within the program. The PHAs also gave us some insight on how they're tapping into multiple funding sources for down payment assistance. They are building relationships and partnerships with programs that offer down payment assistance so that buyers can access different grants and are able to stack these grants, these down payment these down payment money. And what that does is that makes the mortgage more affordable, and it promotes affordability, especially in high cost areas. So what this means is that now the buyers have a more opportunity to purchase a home where they want to live, and rather than settling for only where they can afford. So that this provides more housing choice. They're also securing grants for homeownership related services, and that is getting more money in order to provide more supportive services for their buyers who are getting ready to purchase. Another fun thing that they engage in is acknowledgement of the family's progress and also highlighting their achievements throughout the process. I thought it was a fun thing that some of the PHAs held graduations when the buyers graduated from financial workshops. They shared spotlight success stories, and that is something that they do via the webinars or their newsletters, briefings, in order to promote, this great achievement and to be able to motivate others to engage in homeownership. And lastly, supportive services related to self-sufficiency and financial literacy really help improve the outcomes. So a lot of them, what they do is they offer workshops. They partner with lenders and other institutions to offer, for example, budgeting classes, credit recovery, credit repair, and just all of those educational components really help in building a very strong buyer. Next slide, please. Okay, so here I have a map of the concentration of homeownership vouchers. The states shaded in dark blue is where the most homeownership vouchers reside, right? So as Bruce mentioned earlier, we only have about 900 and currently 9669 vouchers, and only 615 PHAs offer the program. So on the map here, the lighter the color, the lighter shade of blue, the less number of vouchers we have. I'm just going to quickly go over the top homeownership PHAs. These really are spread out throughout the country. Some of the factors that include, the reason why they're so successful and why they have so many homeownership vouchers is, it's variable, but it's highly due to the housing market. So we have the Philadelphia Housing Authority coming in at number 1. Next is Chicago Housing Authority, New York State Housing Trust Fund, Louisville Metro Housing, the Housing Authority of New Orleans, Miami-Dade Housing Authority, Knoxville Community Development, New Hampshire Housing, Bernalillo County Housing Department. This is a small PHA in New Mexico. And then on number 10 is the Rochester Housing Authority in New York State. And sadly, there are no homeownership vouchers in Wyoming. As you can see on the screen, the gray state in the middle, there are no homeownership vouchers here presently, but hopefully someday we will start to see that state light up in blue, right? And the darker the blue, the better. Next slide, please. Okay, so we encourage you to visit our HCV homeownership website at HUD Exchange. We are always updating information. We provide updated educational materials. You can download our homeownership guidebook. You can access a very informative homeownership webinar. We have flyers and tutorials. Like I said earlier, if you want to participate in the convenings, if you would like to be part of the Keys to Homeownership committee, please feel free to write to us, and we will gladly add you to the list. You can send us any questions or requests to join at hcv_homeownership@hud.gov. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you all for meeting with us today and listening, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Claudia. This has been a really good resource. The dashboard is quite helpful. We will send out links after this call on this as well. I know that there's been a problem with our friends at Zoom, and it looks like it's fixed. And so if you have colleagues who were not able to get in, just let them know that it's working again. We seem to be maxed out at 500, and we've crossed the barrier, even though we've done a lot to make sure this wouldn't happen. One other thing I would just mention on the challenges that housing authorities have is that they sometimes are short of staff in terms, well, okay, let me put it differently, that a lot of the housing authorities doing the voucher program are very geared towards tenants for rental. If they do home ownership, they'll need some separate skill sets and staff. And sometimes that's a capacity problem, and that's one of the hesitations that housing authorities have. And innovation is that there are the vouchers, as Claudia mentioned, are portable. And in a number of places, there are more regional or statewide institutions, housing authorities that will take the home ownership voucher, and it can be transported to that housing authority. So this is kind of one of the things we're really trying to promote as a best practice. So Michigan does that. We believe other states do that. That's one of the reasons that New York State is on the top list of the top 10, because they're solving that problem that way. So one of the things that NHRC's really been active in is try to figure out how to identify what these specific challenges are in the field, and let's see if we can problem solve them. We'll be doing a lot of work on this. So let's go and hear from some practitioners that are actually doing the deals. They're routinely doing them. So Chicago is number 2 on the list. And I'm thrilled to say we have Danielle Matthews, who's been working this field for quite a while. You'll see she's deeply knowledgeable. She's with the Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago. Danielle, welcome.
Thank you, Bruce. It's a pleasure to be here and to provide this really important information to other housing counseling agencies looking to participate in this space. NHS Chicago has been around since 1975. We're celebrating 50 years of service in our community. Our commitment has been to create opportunities for people to live in affordable homes and improve their lives and strengthen their neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Our partnership with the Chicago Housing Authority began a little bit after they launched their program sometime in 2020. We've been a partner with the Chicago Housing Authority in terms of multiple programs that has been offered. We provide a full cycle of homeownership services to community members, as well as participants in the Choose to Own program that launched with the Chicago Housing Authority. Next slide. The Chicago Housing Authority, commonly known as CHA, has 2 different homeownership programs. Under the CHA Home Initiative, the Chicago Housing Authority program is called the Choose to Own program, which qualifies housing choice voucher and public housing families to use their housing subsidy to buy a home and receive monthly assistance toward their mortgage payment. CHA provides participants with resources to purchase their home and use their voucher and pay their mortgage for up to 15 years. The second program as part of the Home Initiative is the CHA Down Payment Assistance Program, which NHS Chicago also administers. We provide grant assistance for up to $20,000 to participants to buy a home within the city of Chicago. And participants can only take advantage of one subsidy program. And so it's often that some participants will decide to use the grant opposed to their voucher toward their monthly mortgage payment. Next slide. The Choose to Own program has a list of qualifying participation requirements. 1, the participant must be a CHA voucher holder or public housing resident for a minimum of 1 year. That information is verified by the Housing Authority before the participant is referred over to the Housing Counseling Agency. The participant must also be in compliance with the Housing Choice Voucher Program or their public housing lease. So that is very important as well. And must be a first-time home buyer and may not have owned a home in the last 3 years. They must purchase a single-family, townhome, or condominium or co-op in the city of Chicago. And they must meet specific requirements based on income, credit, and savings. And so for the income portion, I want to dive a little bit into the qualifications here, which is very important to participate in a program. Working or self-employed families must meet or exceed the HUD's low income limit of 50% AMI, as well as a senior or disabled member must exceed, or their income must not exceed the $10,000 minimum requirement per year. They must be credit worthy, although there's no specific credit score requirement, but they must commit to building good credit history for at least 1 year to participate in the program. And once the participant is referred over to the housing agency, we do verify credit and income. And so we take the participant through that process as well. And they must have a commitment of either saving the $3,000 requirement for working families or self-employed. And if you are disabled or if the participant is a senior, there is a minimum of $2,000 in asset requirement, and have the ability to continue to save because of the expenses that's required for closing and down payment. Next slide. The Choose to Own model, it's a process in which the participant must go through with the Chicago Housing Authority as well as the HUD agency. So the 10 steps to homeownership, and I've listed 6 here, but I'll dive into the other steps. That's really important, part of what Claudia mentioned in her presentation as well. So the first step is to apply to participate in the program. There is an application process, and there is a very important orientation that the participants here in Chicago must complete as their first step. Step 2, they meet with the Choose to Own or the Chicago Housing Authority program staff to determine eligibility in the qualification process. In step 3, the participant must work with the HUD agency to get started, and that is completing an 8-hour homebuyer education course and completing pre-purchase housing counseling. And I'll go into that process a little bit deeper in the next slides. Step 5 is to start shopping for a home, and that means collaborating with the important partners of this particular program. We have a relationship with preferred lenders, realtors within the community, as well as home inspectors and attorneys. So the participant is referred to each partner in the process to make sure they clearly understand each role and the importance of that particular professional to help them get through to closing on their new home. The next step is not listed here, but it's also a part of the process, which after they submit an offer, exactly what Claudia mentioned earlier, there's 2 inspections. They must pass both inspections. One inspection, of course, is the health and safety inspection with the housing authority, as well as their private home inspection. And that's really important to teach the participant the difference between both and why they're both important. And the last step in the process, of course, is closing on the home. We celebrate all the successes of our participants that get through the program to closing. However, there is an additional step, which is post-purchase counseling, that I'll also discuss later in the presentation as well. Next slide. We provide the full cycle of home ownership for our participants. So to help the participants get prepared, the Housing Counseling Agency's role is to provide financial and credit education and counseling. One important aspect, some participants are referred over to housing counseling agencies and they are not mortgage ready. So we will take them through the cycle of preparing for their budget, credit, improving their savings through education and counseling. For those who are a little bit closer to being mortgage ready, we require the participant to complete the 8-hour homebuyer education course that NHS offers, as well as one-on-one housing counseling. So part of the role of the housing counseling, the HUD counseling agencies are to work with the participant to make sure that they complete all of the education and counseling process. Not everyone that comes through the program is mortgage ready, as I indicated. So in the one-on-one counseling session, it's really important that the agencies dive into their credit report and review their debt to make sure that they have that affordability and budget to qualify for the loan. We talk them through what the pre-qualification process will look like when working with the mortgage lender. We talk about the loan approval process. It's really important to explain the difference between FHA and FHA, VA, as well as conventional loan products, and really understanding the lender partner's loan products. So lots of training on their products is really important so that you can make sure the participant understands their options in the loan process. We also cover available down payment assistance and closing cost assistance. That's really important to make the home purchase affordable for the participant. We know that some of the participants may not have enough for closing, so it's really important that we partner and we show the participant how to capital stack across different local down payment assistance programs, as well as talk through that purchase process and understanding the importance of working with their attorney and what those new homeowner responsibilities are. And so those are some of the things that we cover in our one-on-one housing counseling process. Once the participant moves forward to close, the program also requires the participant to complete 1 year of post-purchase housing counseling, and that also includes educational workshops. So the role of the housing counselor is to assist the homeowner from transitioning from renting to homeownership. They receive one-on-one assistance every quarter to continue to look at their monthly expenses, making sure that they continue with saving because of those, unexpected and emergency repairs that may come up. We want to make sure the participants truly understand the importance of having a savings account for those expenses. We talk through home warranties and property taxes and insurance. We know that those are two parts of the mortgage that can really drive up the cost of their mortgage payment. So we work with the participants in post-purchase counseling to make sure they understand all of these services. And what's really important that we started to implement here at NHS is helping our participants understand how to save on their energy cost, as well as those home maintenance programs that may be offered locally from city, state, or local organizations. And so we talked through those different programs in post-purchase counseling. We've also implemented estate planning education for our participants, as well as referrals to local attorneys that can assist with estate planning, which is very important to homeowners. Next slide. And so Claudia mentioned staffing at the public housing agencies. This is also important on a housing counseling level as well. Chicago has a high volume of participants in the program, so it's really important as an agency to staff up the program to make sure that you have key players internally to manage the volume. For us at NHS, we have a program manager that's specifically working through the Choose to Own program and client base there. We have 6 housing counselors to help support the number of referrals that comes through for counseling and education services. We have 1 education coordinator. We want to make sure that we are offering the appropriate services in terms of education for the clients. That can be student loan education, home maintenance programs, and other important topics that the participants will need from pre-purchase to post-purchase services. And I have 1 intake coordinator as well that will help process the referrals that we receive from the local housing authority and to make sure the clients understand the process here at NHS. It's a lot of information and it can be really confusing for the participants. So we want to make sure that we provide those necessary resources in terms of our counseling staff to manage the program. We offer our services both virtually and in person and telephone counseling as well. Some of the participants really enjoyed the virtual aspect of meeting one-on-one with their counselor, but we want to make sure that there is an opportunity for our clients, especially some of our seniors who still like that in-person service aspect. And we have 3 offices within the city of Chicago to support our clients in different communities here. Next slide. The one-on-one and pre-counseling services that I mentioned earlier, again, we work with the participant to identify their goals and what challenges they may face. Not everyone that comes to the program are mortgage ready, meaning they have a 640 credit score and they're ready for that pre-approval. Some of the clients that the housing agencies engage with are long-term clients, and that means they can be in a program for several years. We've had a participant that took 2 years, but they have successfully closed and purchased their home after working with the NHS for over 2 years. And that is a success story that we often highlight. We teach our clients how to how to maintain an affordable budget when we talk about sustainability. That's really important in this program. And so some of our participants really don't know what that budget looks like and how to continue to save. So it's not something that we focus on solely in pre-purchase counseling. It's really important in post-purchase counseling and education as well. Next slide. So throughout the cycle of homeownership, we monitor the client's progress through follow-ups, engagements anywhere between 30 and 60 days, depending on an action plan. We communicate with the home buying team, collaborating with the lenders, the real estate agents, as well as home inspectors is really important. The housing counselors really want to build out that relationship so that we understand both the services that they provide and also the partners, the preferred partners that's at the table, understand the choose to own process. We often collaborate with the lenders in meetings to understand their loan products. That's really important when you're looking to match clients with specific loan products that's available within a community to make sure they understand what options they have. Also building out a relationship with local insurance agents and real estate agents is really important. We want to express how important it is to work with a community partner, but also someone that understands to choose to own or the housing choice voucher homeownership program, because there are specific guidelines that must be followed. And so collaborating is very important in this particular program. We also work with down payment assistance programs. We provide those referrals to participants. So it's really important that we, as a housing agency, we teach the buyers how to capital stack. That's very, very important to help them utilize less of their savings as a down payment or closing cost so they can retain their funds for post-purchase activities like repairs and health and safety issues that may be existing in the home as well. Next slide. As I spoke about down payment assistance, we offer down payment assistance through the Chicago Housing Authority as well. We collaborate with different partners through Federal Home Loan Bank, our state finance agency. So making sure the housing counselors are trained on down payment assistance in the community is really important. We want to make sure that the participants really understand the benefits of using a lender that has access to these programs as well. We also provide resources in terms of home maintenance and home improvement programs. In our post-purchase education and counseling program, participants often need those resources to make those costly repairs. And so we try to prioritize participants in the homeowners and the choose to own homeowners program to make sure they have access to these necessary resources, specifically legal aid programs, as well as estate planning services that may be needed. Another important resource that you guys will learn more about today is NHS Chicago has partnered with local organizations to offer a peer mentorship program for the housing choice voucher participants. It is a challenge to go through the full cycle of homeownership for participants here in Chicago. So we found through research that peer mentorship is a really great resource to help motivate the participant from the time they apply for the program all the way through closing, because there's so many different moving parts and different aspects of the program that some can be discouraged and find a way to drop out of the program. We want to continue to motivate and encourage the participant to stay engaged for the long-term benefits. And so through peer mentorship, we found that very valuable. And for those who are successful with purchasing a home, we've also launched a homeowners club for public housing residents. So that's a network of homeowners that can collaborate with each other and share resources around specific topics that's needed for new homeowners. And so that's a really great resource that we've also found a benefit to partner with the Chicago Housing Authority participants as well. Next slide. Some additional information on post-purchase services. This is a very important aspect of the program. As I mentioned earlier, participants are required to complete 1 year of post-purchase education and counseling. So they participate in a post-purchase workshop of their choice once per quarter that will review different topics that's necessary to their needs or their concerns in their home. as well as meeting one-on-one with the housing counselor to discuss those specific circumstances, like I said, home maintenance, home repairs, energy weatherization, even rehab, or connecting with local services in their community as well. Next slide. This is a fee-for-service program for housing counseling agencies. This is the way we have our program structured here at NHS Chicago. And so when we talk about the cost of services, this is how it's laid out with NHS Chicago. So we offer pre-individual counseling services that I mentioned before. And the description of this particular program, of course, is your initial session, any follow-ups, admin time it takes your team to process the referral, as well as to meet with the client. We estimate somewhere between 6 to 8 hours. Again, every client is different. So when you talk about billing hours, you definitely want to have the ability to track that in your CMS. We offer the 8-hour home buyer education under this program. It's a fee for service. So we look at the time it takes to offer that particular workshop, as well as any materials, admin time. The 8-hour certificate is provided on a monthly basis to the housing authority. And so all of that information is how we determine a cost for the 8-hour workshop. Receipt of the lender pre-approval. We are working with our clients. Some, again, are short-term. They're mortgage ready within 3 months or less. But then we also have some of our clients that are long-term. It does take time to get our clients ready for that pre-approval. And so we are compensated based on the number of pre-approvals that we assist the clients with as well. Credit reports. A credit report is required for every participant and a co-borrower that is going through the homeownership process. Therefore, there's a cost for credit reports, as well as credit counseling, those long-term clients. Again, it can take several years to get someone prepared for homeownership. And so you can also be compensated for the longer-term clients that's in your pipeline. And for post-purchase services, we receive compensation for post-purchase services for education and counseling, as well as foreclosure prevention. And so these are the different cost descriptions that we have across all of the services that we provide for the local housing authority. And next slide. And so some program successes, this is really important, back to what Claudia mentioned as well. The Chicago Housing Authority is #2 on with their program and offering the homeownership program for voucher holders. CHA has created, as of now, 859 homeowners. We have several more in a pipeline that we are rooting on to success and hoping they become a homeowner by the end of the year. 358 were NHS Chicago program participants. Currently, as you guys know, 391 are currently active in the program. CHA is doing a really great job with marketing the program with the recommendations of local agencies and partners like NHS Chicago. They're doing an awesome job at marketing this program to new voucher holders or public housing residents. And so we do anticipate an increase on participants going into 2025. And thank you all. If you have any questions regarding NHS involvement in the program, or how your local housing authority or your local housing counseling agency can participate, or if you need any additional resources from NHS Chicago, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Excellent, very helpful, impressive, Danielle, nice work. A couple things just to highlight here. So one is Danielle listed the available properties that could be included for purchase. So you should be aware that 2, 3, and 4 unit properties are not eligible currently under the rules. We are very pushing hard on trying to get this fixed, but it's the way that the rule was originally written, and it's a technical issue, but and there's some sympathy on HUD's side, so we're hoping that there will be a proposed rule change to try to fix this, so that we have property so people can do a duplex, and there's lots of value to that. The other thing I would note is that NHS Chicago is contracted by the housing authority. They pay for the program, and that is the ideal model. And we think that's the best practice. And in reality, not every housing authority is paying for the housing counseling, and you may need to look elsewhere to find the funding for that. Um, but the other thing to be aware of is that the housing counseling must be provided by a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. So a few housing authorities are their own HUD-approved housing counseling agency, and that's fine. They're playing by the rules. But for the rest, the counseling work really needs to be done by a housing counseling. So we're aware that we have probably a lot of content still to come. So we're going to go over the 2-hour program we had. We're going to jump over to Daniel Ruggiero, who's got a lot of experience in the field. He's one of our go-to people in figuring out complex issues in our field. He's with Homes on the Hill. Daniel, go ahead. Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, my name is Daniel Ruggiero. I'm a HUD certified housing counselor here at Homes on the Hill in Columbus, Ohio. That was some great information from Danielle. I can tell you here in Central Ohio, we're probably not quite as advanced as they are over in Chicago. But hopefully I can give some good tips in what we're doing here to make sure this housing choice voucher program is successful. If you can go to the next slide. Here in Central Ohio, we work with the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority. And I know we have some CMHA friends on the call here today, so they're the experts of this program. But I can tell you, in general, the number one thing you want to make sure your housing counselors understand is just to have a basic familiarity with, the general program guidelines when working with the housing authority. Here in Central Ohio, our programs, kind of the first of the year, they changed and relaxed a little bit. They got rid of that 640 minimum credit score, and started really marketing, getting the word out more. So I think we've seen a big increase this year in housing choice voucher holders interested in buying homes, or just people in general. How can I get a voucher and purchase a home? I think because of relaxing the guidelines and getting the word out. But here in Columbus, of course, the number one requirement is to attend a HUD certified homebuyer class. They are also looking for stable income, a minimum savings requirement, and those exemptions are not for people with disabilities. So those are the initial requirements that at least our housing counselors are aware of. And then our housing counselors want to have a good relationship with the homeownership program coordinators at CMHA and the family self-sufficiency program people. We've had good relationships with them in the past. Some of them there was some turnover again recently at the beginning of the year, but it's very important to have those relationships in place. Some other things you may want to discuss with your housing authority would be, is the housing choice voucher payment made to the servicer or the homeowner? Here in Columbus, it's to the new homeowner, and that's also important when you're discussing, the housing counseling with the home buyer, so they understand all of those things. If you could go to the next slide. So what's the housing counseling agency's role in the whole process? Danielle explained it in great detail. I'll explain a few other little nuances we have. First of all, the HUD certified housing counseling, as Bruce said, is a requirement, and that's something that we can provide. So that's what we do, the home buying education classes. Now, here at Homes on the Hill, we require the pre-purchase housing counseling session generally to occur before the home buying education class. So we want to get the families in at least for one session of housing counseling first. And that's where we look at the things that everyone does when they're doing the housing counseling. The credit, like I said, there's no minimum credit score now from the housing authority, but of course lenders are still going to have those credit score requirements. So we're still tasked with getting people mortgage ready. In the past, or you may want to have a third-party authorization to release that credit information to the housing authority, or at least be able to get the permission from the families you're counseling if they do require that. The other thing, when you're looking at the housing affordability, I know most housing counselors at least look at this in a general way, but with housing choice vouchers, it becomes a little bit even more deeper, I think, when you're looking to kind of analyze. Some people don't really know how much their voucher is or will be when they're using it for the home ownership. We've talked to several families where they say, well, they're thinking about buying a home, but they don't want to use their voucher. So when you can show that analysis of the affordability of how much that would help their affordability if they did continue down that path, to help them make that decision, it's really good counseling best practices, I guess. The other thing we do when you're looking at the credit and those different programs like Danielle talked about with stacking, when you're combining these various special affordable housing programs like a housing choice voucher, a down payment assistance program. Here in Columbus, we've had 2 closings that have used housing choice vouchers with the Community Land Trust. And when you start stacking those specialized programs, it becomes just a little more nuanced. More levels of housing counseling might be needed to kind of match them all up. They all have different, they might have different income requirements, different DTI, whatever. So looking at all those things in a little bit closer lens is definitely required. That's the same thing with the budget. When we get into the budget, there's some down payment programs that require a little bit more budget analysis, and especially knowing what that housing choice voucher amount is going to be. And the savings plan, I mentioned there's a minimum savings requirement lots of times on these programs. So if families haven't reached that goal yet, working on that savings plan, setting goals, putting a timeline really helps to keep them on track and reach that goal of home ownership. One of our primary roles, of course, is to refer families to the housing homeownership program coordinator or the family self-sufficiency program people. A lot of times, even people that have housing choice vouchers don't know who that connection is or don't know, how to get into these programs. So it's important to have those contacts, have those flyers, have that information available to your counselors and in your office. Probably the most important thing, which I neglected to put on this slide, is the follow-up component. I know all the agencies do, follow up as part of their HUD housing counseling, but it just becomes extremely important with housing choice voucher holders to continue that follow-up after the home buying classes, after the housing counseling, before they've purchased the home, whether they're having issues with the down payment assistance, land trust, realtors, lenders, everything that Danielle mentioned. But also, if you have a post-purchase counseling component to your program, it's great to put these families, let them know about that. If you have some sort of incentive for them to return for post-purchase counseling to help keep them on track in home ownership as their income and situation changes after they become homeowners. It's just, I can't emphasize enough how important that is. If you could go to the next slide. Some of the issues we've had, like I said, we're not as advanced here in Columbus as Chicago, but marketing and getting the word out for the housing choice voucher program has always been a #1 issue. Here in Columbus, our housing authority does a good job with that. They have a monthly or a resource roundup newsletter they get out to all the participants that talks about it. There's been some realtors in town doing seminars that have focused on it. So I think with that, the word's getting out. But as a housing counseling agency, you can help that by, when you have a booth or a table at an event, having that information out there regarding housing choice voucher home ownership. We still see many people that will come and say, I heard so-and-so's sister's cousin purchased a home with a voucher. Is that true? So it's a lot of dispelling myths and just helping, we have to do our part to get the word out there. We do see a lot of families come to us that don't have a voucher yet that would like to participate in the program. So having that information, how do you sign up for a voucher? How do you even get started in that process is important as well. One thing that we have found is that, families are not required to tell you that they have a housing choice voucher. But here at Homes on the Hill, I don't think we've had a question on our intake that says, do you have a voucher? And I don't think we've ever had on a line on the budget for putting that voucher. So we have had situations where had counselors working with families where we don't know that they even have a voucher. So on paper, things are not adding up towards home ownership. And if you don't know that, really that housing choice voucher is the key to everything. So we're working on figuring out ways to find out more information about that up front. Many people are not going to show up for their housing counseling appointment with a copy of their voucher. They might just say, well, I pay $200 or $300 a month is my portion. They might know what their rent is, things like that. So you may have to ask a few other questions to dig deeper into how much their voucher might be when they're on the path to homeownership. Another issue we've seen is I don't believe our CMS has a way to track housing choice voucher holders, if there's a button for that. And it might be just that I'm naive to where that button is. But our tracking has been difficult. We haven't really focused on tracking like that here before. All I can tell you is there's been a lot more activity this year, so we're very happy about that. But I think that's important when it comes to, working with a partnership with your housing authority. If you can report back how many of those families you're working with, if you're working to try to set up a fee-for-service program, that would be important. We do not have a fee-for-service program here at Homes on the Hill with our authority. It's more of a mutual, like I said, we send people to us, they send people to them, or vice versa, whatever. But we don't have a fee for service. The communication between us and them, the housing authority, again, is very important. I mentioned the client follow-up before here. So really that's how we do everything here. I think the tracking and the follow-up are things that we're going to continue working on, and hopefully at the end of this year we'll be able to report back even some bigger numbers on how all the programs are working together. I think that's all I have, Bruce.
Excellent, Danielle, and very helpful as always. We are grateful for that. And it's interesting to note. So as we talked about whether a housing authority funds or doesn't, obviously we wanted to. We'll also try to explore this tracking question more. I'm almost certain that we were able to include that in the MISMO data standards. I'll check on that to make sure, but that's a good takeaway from all this. So we also have a third presenter on the from a practicing counseling agency, and that's Karen Hausknecht-Yetman, who was one of the first people into our working group 3 years ago. Has been really helpful in us figuring out a lot of the issues, and she's going to walk us through some of the details about their program and some of their learnings as well. So Karen?
Great. Thank you, Bruce. As Bruce said, I'm Karen. I'm from Belmont Housing Resources for Western New York. We're in Buffalo, New York, so way the western side of the state. I've been doing this for about 23 years now, so I have a lot of experience in working with both Section 8 home buying and housing counseling. If you go to the next slide. I just want to give just a brief overview on who Belmont is and how I have this kind of experience. Is I always say we're almost like 3 nonprofits under one roof. So we do the Housing Choice Voucher Administration. We're what's called a PHA agent. So for 4 different PHAs, we actually administer their programs right here at Belmont. In our service area, there's more than 6 different PHAs, and we work with the other ones for the homeownership program as well. But I'm also a HUD certified housing counselor, and I work within the team that does the HUD certified housing counseling. But we also do development, housing rehab, property management. We have about 25 different apartment complexes we manage. And it's nice because we all get to share the same, IT, accounting, human resources to help reach our goals. So next slide. So working with your local PHAs, for me, like I said, for most of what we do with our PHA, it's easy because I can walk down the hall and I can talk to somebody. But there's a lot of things you can do to help your local public housing authorities or public housing authority agents to help meet their goals. So I know definitely we're here to talk about home ownership today, right? But there's a lot of things that you do in housing counseling that can be really helpful. So when you're bringing up the home ownership side of it, maybe the PHA is kind of a little timid, maybe they're not sure because they're not, we all have the HUD certification. As you can tell from my background, I'm very proud of that. We've all passed this exam. That exam was difficult. And so we know mortgages. We know how to help someone get into home ownership. Someone at PHA may not feel as comfortable and how to do that kind of math and what that's going to look like. So maybe it's having a conversation that, for the rental side of the housing choice voucher, maybe they need help with rental counseling or with eviction prevention. Or maybe they do have a program already and they need help with foreclosure prevention. So there's a lot of ways that you can work with your local PHA. And, obviously homeownership is what we like to do. It's the great stories, it's the feel-good part of it. But, there could be other ways that you could work together and kind of make the case of, let's form this partnership. Let's see what we can do because you have clients that need our assistance. And so let's do that together. Okay, next slide. So, and at Belmont, and also we partner with the other agencies that do this, there's something that's called the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. We've kind of talked about this a little bit already through some of the programs. But I would say FSS is the program where HUD is kind of saying, like, we don't want you to have to use as much of our assistance if you don't need to. It's kind of a workforce development program. It's promoting workforce, it's promoting, post-secondary education or getting, GEDs, things like that, and also different financial capabilities. Just like everyone up here has different housing counseling programs, every FSS program is a little bit different. So you want to talk to them to kind of see like how their program runs, what their goals are, and maybe how you can work a little bit together with that. The Family Self-Sufficiency Program is great because as someone makes more income, with the housing choice voucher, what happens is people have to start paying more rent. And so, if there's an idea that maybe people are scared to get higher paying jobs because then you have to pay more rent. I don't really believe that's true, but that's one of the ideas out there. With the FSS program, if someone starts paying more money towards their rent, what happens is that extra money goes into what they call their escrow account, that if they end up becoming full-time employed, public assistance free, they get that escrow account. The escrow account can be any amount. It could be nothing, depending on what their income was when they came in. We've had as high as almost $30,000 in that escrow account that someone got, tax-free. So that's not typical. Usually it's like around $4,000 or $5,000 in that escrow account, but, it's something that they get it tax-free. And this is another thing they could use for their homeownership goals. Next slide. So with the FSS program, every funded FSS program has a requirement for what's called the Program Coordinating Committee, or what we call the PCC. So the PCC is a group that, will gather depending on how often they want to do it. And it should include, service providers, other key partners within the community. And one of the key partners they always have is that they say that it should be a housing counseling agency. So if there is a funded FSS program in your area, they probably have a PCC that you could join. Through the PCC, we're able to learn about the other housing authorities because every housing authority is going to run their Section 8 to homeownership program just a little bit differently. One thing I learned is the one housing authority, they have a very specific disclosure, just like we use for foreclosure to talk about the loan, that they will not talk about the Section 8 to homeownership for this person until the specific disclosure is filled out. So now when someone comes in to meet with one of our counselors, they say they're getting their voucher through this place, we fill out that disclosure right away just so we can have those conversations. Having these conversations are great, and knowing what the programs are, just like Daniel had mentioned, because every home ownership program can be a little different. And being ready to talk about that with that housing authority really helps move someone forward. I'm going to tell a quick story about someone who closed just last month on May 16th. And this isn't technically my story, and so I'm going to give her a shout out because I know she's on the call today. The housing counselor, Mary Dolan at Belmont, she was able to help this person. She worked with her for over 2 years, helping gather everything together for her home purchase. So everything was great. We were able to, through our bank partner, who was M&T Bank for this loan, and through some other programs we have, we were able to get her $65,000 to help with down payment, closing costs. And the home buyer was a person with a disability who needed some rehab to the home to make it accessible and some free grant money for that. So we were so happy. We got $65,000 together. And then she found a home that was within her price range and she was about to purchase. When we first did the calculations, her debt to income, her front end ratio was 39.23%. They have a rule, this PHA has to be under 40%. So we're like, okay, great, we're good. And then a few things changed. And suddenly her ratio went from 39.23% to 40.35%. And because it was more than 40% of her monthly income, now the PHA is saying we will not accept this home purchase anymore. So through M&T, the loan officer actually contacted the seller and just said, we just need you to reduce the sales price by $3,000 because we already got her $65,000 worth of grant funds where there was no more funds we could get for her. So we work closely with M&T, with the PHA, with our housing counselor here, and with the buyer, all coming together to help this person close. And I'm happy to say she did close last month, so it is a happy story. But sometimes, they'll hear the person, the Section 8 housing choice voucher person, they hear that they can't buy and they don't know why. And that's why getting disclosures, finding out the PHA rules, that's why these are so important and why we need to know exactly what's happening and what the rules are for every single PHA. All right, so next slide. So I know, and I've seen a couple questions in the chat about this, how are lenders actually using the housing choice voucher? And I think a lot of times it might be that loan officers just don't know what it is or what this means. And so again, that's where the PCC or just as housing counselors, those conversations we're having with lenders, these are things that we want to talk about. So how are they going to use it? Well, some lenders are going to say they don't use it, but that's when we have the conversation, well, you should. Some are going to use it as income, increasing the mortgage amount. So what does that mean? Let's say easy numbers. They're getting $100 a month in Section 8 assistance. They're going to add that on and say that they get, $1,200 a year and add that in as income to help qualify for the mortgage. And then a few may use what they call the offset. I know we're going to hear from some lenders who are going to talk more about what that means. Well, with the offset, what happens is they take what the person qualifies for a mortgage on their own, and then they add it on to what they can qualify for, so they can qualify for even more of a mortgage payment. And so for, persons who are disabled, who are going to have the Section 8 assistance throughout the life of the loan, this makes it so someone can actually, afford to buy a home, and because it's never going away. And I'm not sure if this was brought up, if for a family who is non-disabled, they do have the assistance for 15 years or half the life of the loan. On the next slide, I have kind of an explanation on the difference and how someone might qualify. Now, when we started off, I kind of said, I'm here in Buffalo, New York. Our housing prices are a little bit more affordable. So when you see these numbers, and if you're in a more expensive place, it's going to look a little bit different. But if you're in a more expensive place, the person's probably getting additional Section 8 assistance as well. So this is someone who closed on her home back in February. So, I looked at to kind of see what would the difference be for her, if between having no housing choice voucher, using it as income, or using it as offset. So this was a single mom. She had 2 kids, $26,000 in income, and then she had $100 in monthly debt obligations. So when she first did the calculations with interest rates at that point period of time, she qualified for a $63,500 mortgage, which even in our affordable market, you're not going to find anything for that amount. When we looked at it as income, and when she went to one of the lenders who used it as income, now she qualified for $99,000. So we're talking about 35% more of a home she qualified for, which is great because it is, it helped get her closer, but that still isn't enough even in our affordable market. But then when you do the offset, so again, you add it on afterwards, she actually qualified for a $167,000 mortgage. Now, me as a housing counselor, I'm sitting there thinking, I don't want you to go that high, but that is what she qualified for. In the end, she got about a $140,000 home, so she didn't go as high as she could, which that made me happy. But she's in her home, she's really happy, and being able to do this offset and having that partnership really helped her be able to purchase that home. So that's it for me. My name is Karen. I work at Belmont Housing. That's my contact information. I'll put it in the chat as well if anyone wants to talk afterwards. And I'll be here for the Q&A session at the end.
Okay, thank you. And I will point out that lenders are required by law to treat housing choice voucher funds as income. So this is part of the ECOA. And I'm sure Allison later on will touch on this as well. But so that doesn't fly, and you do need to have a chat with that lender. We're doing a lot of work to educate lenders, and we're having a big meeting with the lending community in the middle of July. It'll be co-hosted by the MBA and the Housing Policy Council. So we hope to. We've been making some progress with lots of lenders. There's certainly some lenders like that have been doing this for a while. We're talking to two of them today, but we're getting more on board, and I think we're gonna see more flexibility coming up. But this issue about offset versus income, we need to dive in a little deeper. That's a pretty critical piece here. So I'm going to move us on. Another person who was one of the original members of of our working group to help reform the Section 8 program, Patricia Fraun with the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance. And we wanted to really have them talk about kind of what their learnings have been about how to reach Section 8 voucher holders. So it is one of the problems that the housing authorities are the only ones who really know who they are. And they may be a gateway to getting in, but it's also making people feel comfortable and understand how this works and whether it's appropriate for them. So I think they've done some really good thinking about this. Patricia, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, again, my name is Patricia. I'm with the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance. We're a membership-based nonprofit fair housing organization serving the Chicago region. Our mission is to combat housing discrimination and promote equitable place-based opportunity through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. Next slide, please. So in 2019, we began looking into this program after learning about voucher holders who had used their voucher to purchase a home. At that time, we really knew virtually nothing about this program, and we found that our colleagues and partners were really similarly stumped about what is this program, how does it work? But we also saw great interest and desire among the voucher holders that we work with to learn more about and gain access to this program. So we wanted to know everything. We spent several years learning everything we could about this program, from the federal regulations that created it to the programs that are available locally. And our research was really rooted in the experiences, input, and direction of voucher holders. In our first, so I'm going to share in the chat, we released 2 reports exclusively about the voucher program over the past few years. And in our first report, we interviewed or surveyed close to 450 voucher holders in Cook County, and we found that the vast majority, or about 92%, really desired to own a home. And when we asked how homeownership could impact their lives, the folks that we spoke with really noted that it would provide greater safety, stability, and independence. So for the folks we engaged, homeownership was not just about growing wealth, but shifting power and gaining control over the decisions that impact their lives. And we found that public housing authorities already have the power to make that aspiration of homeownership a reality for many. Next slide, please. No, there we go. Oops. There we go. So HUD's 2022 program guidebook offers a really straightforward, I guess I'll say, formula for what it takes for success in this program, which is bankable program participants, affordable units, willing lenders, and agency and partner capacity to pull it all together. So the report that we released just yesterday, actually one of those links, provides strategies to address each one of those aspects. And today I'm going to talk about 2 of them that are related, again, to engaging and supporting voucher holder participants. Next slide, please. So one of the strategies to promote support for voucher participants and also market the program is through peer mentorship. So we launched that here in Chicago with several local partners, including NHS, who you heard from earlier today. And this idea really came out of conversations with voucher holders who wanted to see more of that one-on-one peer support to help navigate what really is kind of a terrifying process of becoming a new homeowner. So we worked with voucher holders to really dive into this idea of peer mentorship, understand what the job of a mentor should be for folks who were voucher homeowners, to understand what they wish they knew as they were going through the process to become a homeowner, what qualities they wanted a mentor to possess, and what training and support mentors would need. So in the end, we constructed a homeowner mentor program that was really created by and for voucher holders. And homeowner mentors are housing choice voucher holders who have that lived experience of using a voucher to purchase a home of their own. And they serve as guides for prospective homeowners, and they provide that one-on-one support throughout the home buying process by working with their housing counselor counterparts to help participants, on the one hand, meet the program requirements, but also set and stick to their personal goals and navigate any barriers. So this program is marketed by NHS, who, as Danielle mentioned earlier, provides the HUD required counseling for about half of all Chicago voucher homeowners. Our program was officially launched in September of 2023 with 5 peer mentors. Next slide. So I think Danielle alluded to this earlier too, that building a new program does not come without its challenges, and we've navigated quite a few challenges to the program. But at this point in the program, we've really come into our stride, and we're finding great success in really creating an environment for deep connection between mentors and their mentees. And we've also seen success in the fact that we've had about 40 prospective mentees attend orientation sessions. We've had 21 mentees enroll in the program, with 5 that are pending currently. We've witnessed 2 mentees close on homes, which is a huge success. And there are additional folks in that pipeline who are mortgage ready and will hopefully be purchasing soon as well. Next slide. Another component of this program was the establishment of a homeowner club for voucher homeowners to provide peer support, tips, resources, really on an ongoing basis. So while the mentorship program is to support prospective homeowners pre-purchase, that club is really a way to connect and support post-purchase. So the homeowner club is really still in its infancy, but it is a place that's already been established for voucher homeowners to access trusted resources and recommendations from everything related to grant programs, free homeowner resources, to tips about maintenance and locating reliable and affordable contractors for home repairs. I will also say that the Chicago Housing Authority within the past few years has started hosting homeowner fairs as well for voucher homeowners and also prospective homeowners. And I know those have been extremely successful in getting voucher holders interested and aware of the program and connected with resources. We really see that the message is just as important as the messenger, I think, a lot of times. And if you could hear from someone else who has really had a lot of similar experiences to you about this program, it often comes across much more favorably than coming from someone who hasn't had to navigate having a voucher themselves. Next slide, please. So the second strategy that we explored locally in Chicago was one to address the affordable home inventory issue. We know that affordable inventory is a huge problem across the country. And one recommendation that we outlined in our first report was really for housing authorities and community partners to identify and create partnerships with entities that are building the stock of affordable homes. And one model that we learned about was of the Champlain Housing Trust in Vermont, which is one of the largest in the country and partners closely with their local housing authority home ownership programs. And I think folks here know that housing trusts are able to create those options because the way they're structured is that they can separate ownership of the land from ownership of the structures on the land, in this case, a home, which really drastically reduces the cost to owners. So we reached out to our local housing trust, the Chicago Housing Trust, and we're really lucky to have connected with a strong leader there who is really enthusiastic about developing a similar model here in Chicago. And when we first connected with them, they had 0 purchases in their history from voucher holders. And they really wanted to see that change. So we worked with them and other partners to craft affirmative marketing strategies that were directly geared towards voucher participants. And this basically means conducted targeted outreach to populations that are least likely to apply for available units. So on the screen, you'll see here some of those efforts that were employed by the Housing Trust, including simple things like emphasizing affirmative statements on housing advertisements that basically encourage voucher purchasers to apply. Also, just doing that direct outreach and engagement. The Housing Trust has partnered with the Chicago Housing Authority to have biannual meetings with voucher participants to share about their units available and how the program works. They've also hosted trolley tours where folks can go and view units in person and do some one-stop shopping with loan officers and housing counselors right on site there. And they've also implemented internal policies that prioritize applicants to their units based on things like income and also geography. And this benefits households from previously redline communities in Chicago, where we know that voucher holders have been historically segregated. So these strategies have all helped the Housing Trust better serve all low-income homeowners, but including voucher holders as well. And since implementing these changes, 3 voucher purchasers have closed on Housing Trust homes in 2023, and 5 others have leveraged that CHA down payment assistance that Danielle mentioned. So taken together in 2023, individuals connected with a CHA in some way totaled 15% of Housing Trust closings that year. So we know that the central feature of the Housing Trust is to ensure that long-term affordability, which does restrict appreciation that homeowners can accrue. But here locally, we really see that these limitations are balanced by the opportunity to purchase a home in a high cost or gentrifying area of the city that typically lower income folks just don't have access to. Next slide, please. So our research demonstrates that over 90% of voucher holders locally really want to own a home. I think Bruce mentioned earlier, like, what if we can get 5% of voucher holders access to the program? We pushed it in our research. We want to see 10% of voucher holders have access to this program. And what that would mean is over 230,000 new homeownership opportunities across the country and about 6,300 in Chicago alone. And when we kind of looked at what that investment would mean, when we look at the average tenure that folks have access to the program, and also what the home purchase prices were in Chicago in 2023. And if we kind of assume that trajectory into the future, this investment would equate to over $1 billion in asset creation for local families here in Chicago. So we are a huge cheerleader for this program, and we want to continue to have these conversations. Really appreciate the invitation to speak today. And I realize my contact information isn't here, so I will drop it in the chat, and I would love to hear from anyone who'd be interested in talking more. Thank you so much.
Excellent. 10%. I love that goal. Go for it. Let's go for it. I'm in. Quick reminder, if you have not been on the NHRC programming, we are specifically for housing counselors and housing counseling agencies and the direct agencies that are directly involved with housing counseling. But we have a listserv that will have a lot more webinars like this, plus advocacy organization issues and things that promote the housing counseling world. And hopefully we can get that popped into the chat again so that you can sign up for that. So we're going to move on to lenders, and so M&T got a couple shout outs here, and so Renee Lewis-Mance is the National CRA Product Manager for M&T. Renee, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bruce. And Karen, thank you so much for Belmont. I know you work closely with Shelley, I believe, who is a CRA loan officer in the Buffalo area. So that's just an awesome story, and actually pinged her and let her know that M&T was receiving a shout out. So I've been with M&T about a year and a half, but my job really is to work throughout the footprint along with the sales staff. My job is solely to make sure that sales is very intentional and focused on increasing opportunities for low income people and families to purchase home. That's my entire job. You want to go to the next slide? So I want to tell you guys a little bit about M&T Bank, specifically because we're a community bank. We are physically located in 13 states within the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic areas. We're a community bank, but as far as a community bank is concerned, we're a larger community bank. We have about 200 billion in assets. We have 22,000 employees. I don't know, over 1,000 branches. But I mention that to you because even though we're a large community bank, the community focus is extremely valuable to us. Our commitment to helping low-income families, individuals achieve homeownership is totally infused in the culture of M&T. So, we understand, the urgency and the issues with affordability, the interest rate environment, the price points of homes totally negatively impact affordability. So before we go on, I just want to tell you guys a little something that I read today in regard to affordability. Because I know from a mortgage perspective, if you take your income and your income is a certain percentage higher than what's allowed for your mortgage payment, then you can't afford that mortgage, right? But I wanted to know how affordability was defined in the housing market. So I found a report, and it was just today, and this report was from First American Financial. And they defined affordable housing market as when a renter can afford at least half of the homes for sale, right? So affordable is a renter, and the median renters can afford half of the homes for sale. There is only one large U.S. housing market that is considered affordable. One. Can anybody guess where that is? Anybody want to venture a guess? Wyoming. That's a good guess, but no, it is not Wyoming, Baltimore, nor Detroit, nor any place in Vermont or Texas or New York or Kansas or California or Iowa or South Carolina. Let me tell you where it is. The one, it's Memphis, Tennessee. So the fact that there is only one large housing market in this entire country that is affordable is demonstrative of the need for a housing choice voucher to enable folks to access mortgages to get into homes. So yeah, wow was right. That's what I said. So our mission is clear. Our mission is to provide more mortgages to more people, specifically low income and multicultural folks. So if you want to go to the next slide. So our job in this whole ecosystem of, housing choice vouchers, the mortgage to me is the most clear cut, at least from an M&T perspective. They've received all of the guidance from you guys. They have gone to the housing authority and they have received all of the necessary approvals. They've talked to the loan officer. They know what they want to do. And so we have approximately 220, I meant to say this, 220 loan officers throughout our footprints that are the feet on the street. They're retail loan officers, they're outside. However, I do want to mention we have a call center that will take calls from individuals who are applying with a housing choice voucher. All of our loan officers are versed on utilizing the housing choice vouchers, but we have a team, a smaller team of CRA loan officers who are specifically trained to work with low-income individuals. So let's talk about the housing choice voucher and how it works with M&T. As Bruce has said, and I believe someone else has said, the housing choice voucher, oh, Allison, when I spoke with Allison from Cross Country yesterday, the housing choice voucher is income. That's what it is. It's income to be able to use to be able to afford a home. So in the slide that you're looking at, this is how we utilize income, how income is derived using the housing choice voucher. So this is a real scenario where we looked at an individual's monthly income from their job, and it was about $6,000, or was $6,000. The housing assistance portion was $2,300. So we receive a letter from the housing authority that designates the amount of the income or the housing choice voucher for that particular individual. So this, in this particular series, the comments were popping up on my screen. In this particular scenario, the total qualifying income is $8,300. However, because this is non-taxable income, we can gross that $2,300 or the HAP portion of the HAP portion to $2,865. So this individual's total income was $8,875 that we were able to use towards a purchase of a home. Next slide. So I believe Bruce mentioned we can use it as income, and then we could also use the housing choice voucher to offset the amount of the mortgage payment. So in this case, the voucher amount was $2,758. The HAP portion was $2,300. The mortgage payment was $2,079. So we look at the mortgage payment, and then we look at the HAP portion. The difference between those two amounts is $79. So the $79, it's what's coming out of the individual's pocket. Offset, mortgage offset with M&T can only be used with FHA mortgages, period. If it's not an FHA mortgage, then the customer or the borrower must use it as income. So typically what our loan officer will do is they will see whether it works out better to use it as income or to offset the mortgage. So these are the two ways that M&T is able to work with loan applicants who have housing choice vouchers. And basically that is it. If you go to the next slide, this is a real life scenario using that individual. They were purchasing a home with a $300,000 sales price. M&T has a grant, and we offer $10,000 to low income individuals purchasing anywhere. So the $30,000 of the grant represents our $10,000. They received another $20,000 from another organization. This would happen to be in New Jersey. So we had a total loan amount of $270,000. So if you look at the PITI, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, the total mortgage payment came out to $3,092. The income was $8,865. We had a housing ratio of 34%, and they were approved for an FHA loan. So I know that was short. It is simplistic. I'm willing to answer any questions that you have at the end, but the upshot of this, we can use it as income with conventional loans, Fannie and Freddie. We use the housing choice voucher as a mortgage offset solely with FHA loans. So we've been doing this for over 15 years now. So we've become pretty seasoned. Yes, that's a good point. Somebody wrote, yes, if we're using it to offset the mortgage payment, the housing choice voucher amount must be sent directly to M&T.
Thank you so much, Renee. That was terrific. I'm just going to quickly touch on a couple, just to sort of review this, because they are big concepts, but it's totally important for your client. So the concept of income is that the income goes to the entire pool of treating the subsidy as income means it's put it into the same pool of money as all the other household income. So they can qualify for a little bit more on the mortgage because of that. And because it's not taxed, it can be plussed up, which means you can do 120, 125% to qualify people. So that has some value to it. And for some people, that will be enough. And that's the model that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac use. So what the FHA model is, and also add that portfolio lenders do this as well, is that they treat the voucher amount as an offset from what the total amount of the PITI is. And essentially, you start from the bottom. You figure out what 30% of a person's income is, what their voucher amount is, and those two need to add to the same or more than what the PITI is, and you obviously don't have to pay extra if it's over the line. So you're offsetting the amount that's paid out by in the house payment if you're doing FHA or with most portfolio lenders. But a very specific element to this is that the payment itself has to go directly to the servicer. It can't go to the homeowner. Unfortunately, the best practice used to be sending the payment to the homeowner. That no longer is necessary, but in fact, it's better to send it to the lender, then they can qualify for the offset. And they'll qualify for a lot more mortgage, and that's helpful to people. So thank you again, Renee. And so we're going to move on to cross country. Allison Griffin, who has been working in the field on this issue for quite a while and based in Texas. So Allison.
Thank you, Bruce, for the opportunity to share my experience and passion on helping families on the Housing Choice Voucher Homeownership Program. I've been a lender for over 32 years and currently work as a manager with Cross Country Mortgage, who's currently the largest lender in the country. But most of my passion and advocacy in the last 18 years is when I discovered in 2006 that we could use this to help more families become homeowners. During that time, I've closed approximately over 400 families, and I've diligently worked with various state representatives, members of Congress, CFPB, Department of Justice, testified in federal court. So yes, I get excited. So that now they have source of income protection in using this income so they can be homeowners. And I have to piggyback, I believe it's Patricia, on going to 10%. I wholeheartedly agree that 10% of these families can definitely go to homeownership. So next slide, please. The one thing I'd like to stress to all the counselors out there is that the voucher is nothing more than a source of income. It's a source of income that comes from the housing authorities through payment standards, and it's typically allows for only 30% of the buyer's income to go towards housing, which helps meet that affordability. I think a lot of times people try to add too many layers or too much information. That's not true. Just a source of income. That's all the voucher is. The great thing about going to homeownership is now that voucher holder has protection under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. In rental, unfortunately in Texas, we don't have any protection for the buyer in rental. One of the things we do here is encourage the families to homeownership where they have that protection. Next slide, please. I do a lot of work educating housing counselors here in the Texas area. And one of the main things is make sure the lenders they're working with or have the voucher income on the application. Work I did with the CFPB and Department of Justice was now on the application, there is a drop-down box on other income that says housing choice voucher. Or if they're utilizing the offset method, then on the application, they would see a reduction in their mortgage payment. This is really, really important. And we've actually helped other lenders get on board because they just didn't understand. So it's a great thing for the housing counselors to help educate their families on doing this. Next slide, please. I think a few people today have echoed the great thing about having the voucher is the amount of purchasing power and going from, the $100,000 up to $300,000 or $400,000, which might be more realistic in everybody's market. Cross Country does offer the FHA offset method, which I've been doing that since 2018. So that helps those families, especially the ones that receive more than 50% of the payment from the housing authority. About the only way we can transition them to homeownership is by having the offset method to make the math work. The voucher income varies like rent. So depending on what area the housing authority has, they're typically broken down by zip codes. The voucher income can vary from maybe $1,000 in one zip code area to another area that might offer $2,000 a month. Then also on the voucher, if they're non-elderly, non-disabled, they're covered up to 15 years on the voucher, provided they don't income out. But the elderly disabled, it's a life of the loan, which is great. And lastly, just to reiterate, ensuring the lender is using the income. Next slide, please. Here's an example of the Houston market. So in Tier A, the voucher standard is $3,333, which in the Houston market, that would be purchasing power of $350,000. However, the buyer goes to Tier C, then the payment standard is only $2,084, so it drops their purchasing power to $227. So this is probably one of the challenges the families have trouble understanding, is that in rental, it's easy because they can look at a rental payment. However, in homeownership, the lender typically issues a pre-approval based on a sales price, not a monthly payment. So the lender will go through 2 or 3, maybe 5 or 6 pre-approvals, depending on the different areas the buyers want to purchase in. Next slide, please. Here's an example in comparison between using the voucher as income versus the offset. So the buyer's wages on this example are $3,225. Should the housing authority pay $1,250, that gives us a total income of $4,475. And unfortunately, with a mortgage payment of $2,348, the buyer would not qualify because my housing ratio is above a 52%. And then if I add a car payment in, then my ratio goes to 62%. So there's not a way to qualify them. However, on the offset method, which is our next slide, We can reduce the monthly payment by $1,250. So now the buyer qualifies. Now we're only qualifying them on their portion. I've had families that pay as little as $1 a month in their portion of the voucher in order to purchase a home. And some of those families on the elderly disabled, they've actually incomed out over time because their payments, the mortgage payments don't rise in the Harris County area because they're capped, which is great. It's one of the benefits that Harris County offers. But this just gives a quick overview example. I could probably talk a long time, but I think everything else I was going to cover has pretty much been covered. And I'm sure there's lots of questions out there. So I think I'll end it here.
Excellent, Allison. Perfectly done. Appreciate it a lot. So we have one more presenter, and that's David Weber from FADA, Public Housing Directors Association. David also has been one of our guiding lights in the reform work we've done over the last 3 years. So, David, as fast as you could do it, go ahead.
Thanks everyone for joining and for staying and for having me on this. I'm a senior policy analyst with FADA, the Public Housing Authority Directors Association. We are a industry association of housing authority executive directors from around the country. We have about 1,900 members. And I'll go through that. Next slide, please, as we try to go quickly. In working with housing authorities, I think it's important to understand the context, especially if they don't have an active program. You know, they're professionals in rental assistance in the rental market. Usually there's not any organizational knowledge about homeownership and home buying and mortgages. So, you know, folks may have some individual knowledge, but that's where a lot of help can be needed. And also just to know that right now, housing authorities are facing a lot of financial challenges due to funding, inadequate funding, rising costs, and unpaid tenant rent. And there's also some hurry, well, they're changing the dates again, but there's some implementations of new HUD systems, the HIP system, and some rules under HOTMA that are also straining the administrative capacity of housing authorities. In terms of that, I would mention some of the things I saw in the chat. If the housing specialist says, "Oh, we don't do that," you might want to check with the ED or look. Most have it in the administrative plan. You could find that online in most cases to see if it's actually still part of their policy, even if they're not actively implementing. Go to the next slide. So I really encourage folks to look at where your opportunities are. So does the housing authority have it in the administrative plan? Do they have a family self-sufficiency program? Folks noted that before, so I won't go into that in much detail, but it does allow significant savings and provide some of the sort of complementary supportive services to help prepare people for home ownership, that then the homeownership counseling can sort of take that to the next step. Once they become employed, have some regular income, there's almost a natural handoff there in some cases, depending on your local programs. Again, are there lenders in your community that are willing to work with you in the housing authority to figure out what the details are in your community? What other kinds of services might be available from other agencies? Pre and post purchase support, other down payments. Generally, you can layer this in with other types of assistance from other sources. And then, of course, what is the housing stock? Is there available stock that could be affordable? Or are there some pipelines specifically geared towards affordable homeownership that might be something you could connect with? Go to the next slide. So some other considerations, especially if your housing authority does not currently have it in their plan and maybe they don't feel like they have the capacity to do it at this point, is to look, is there a statewide or regional voucher program? We know in New York, I think in Michigan, New Hampshire, a few other states have overlapping voucher program jurisdictions. So if you have a statewide program, you may be able to work with that program more easily to allow homeownership in any jurisdiction. Is there state or local government or philanthropic support for the initiatives, the services, the support services that are needed, various kinds of assistance. Who else has collaborators and partnerships with the housing authority, the lender, the real estate industry? If their housing authority doesn't want to do it, who's already working with the housing authority that may be able to work with you to say, hey, maybe convince the housing authority to change their minds. If you have a continuum of care agencies also may have relationships with the housing authority and links to other programs. But as I think almost every one of our speakers noted today, collaboration at your local level is key to making this work. If you go to the next slide, please. FSS, I'm not going to go much into it since we are over time, but it is grant funded. It's available at many housing authorities, but not all housing authorities. It's voluntary for public housing and voucher participants, provides service coordination and related services. Participants who sign up, they have generally a 5-year contract to complete their self-identified goals. If they do, any rent increases which were deposited into escrow that resulted from those income increases from employment are saved, and they can, as someone mentioned in the chat, I think, tens of thousands of dollars can be accumulated in that period of time. Some agencies may have limited FSS slots, and unfortunately the program, traditionally there's been a silo between homeownership counseling and the rental assistance programs. So the FSS program does not really come with any funding for follow-up after participants graduate. But if they do graduate and move to homeownership, a lot of that funding, that support is very important after they purchase. Next slide. The other thing I wanted to mention is VASH. So you may have heard of VASH. It's the Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing Program. And through that, HUD has designated and really set aside vouchers for veterans who've received at least a service assessment and referral, and hopefully additional services from the Veterans Administration Medical Center. In some cases, there are other agencies that perform that role. The VASH vouchers can be used for homeownership just like any other voucher. In those cases where that might work, is the homeownership option in the plan, as I mentioned? Is there a good relationship with the Veterans Affairs Medical Center? Are the VASH vouchers that the local housing authority has fully leased or not? And in terms of, can the VA be a partner? And what other kinds of services may be available? I think, again, the partnerships are key. And there's a lot of ways to make it work depending on what your local landscape is. So that's my sort of, do I have another slide? That's it. I'll put it in the chat as well. There's my contact information. Please feel free to follow up with any questions that you may have directly with me at dweber@phada.org.
Thank you, David. And it's been a great
resource. For right now, unless there's something specific else I should cover.
No, you're doing just great. Thanks so much. Thanks for.
I do want to mention one other thing. To note, the fees that are paid, the $1,500 and the $2,500, are special administrative fees that are provided to the housing authority to help cover some of their costs of operating the program. Chicago is an exception in a lot of ways. Few housing authorities will have the resources to pay for services the way Chicago has done. And zip codes can matter depending on if your agency, your local housing authority, is running their voucher program using the small area fair market rents. There's an increased number of agencies that are required to do that by the end of this year, but some areas are still using a payment standard based on a metropolitan area fair market rent. But your housing authority could give you that information as well.
Yeah, well taken. The housing authority, so you'll talk to your housing authority about what the payment standard is for the voucher payments, and whether it's one payment or if there's a more targeted program, which was described earlier. We're going to take a few minutes for questions. I don't know how you'll manage this, Ellie, but good luck.
Well, I just want to say thank you to the panelists, because I usually give directions to please not to answer the questions in the Q&A box, but because we were so far behind, some of the panelists thankfully did go in and answer some of your questions. So I'm going to try to hit a few highlights. A few different people asked about where can one sign up to enroll for certified specialists for HCV homeownership qualification. I think that really all you need to be is a HUD certified housing counselor. I don't think that there's a special one, but I will let somebody else answer that if they'd like to. David, go ahead. You got your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say there's no formal HUD certification around that. The National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, NARO, does offer a certificate in that, along with some of their other training programs. They have participated in our planning. So there is that option. That would be nahro.org.
Okay. You don't have to have that certificate, though, in order to provide housing counseling for Section 8 voucher holders.
You do not.
So, are buyers subject to annual income research for the life of the loan?
Yes, just
Yes,
the only thing that's different is the inspection. The inspection is once, and then we don't go back to inspect it. But then after that, annually, you still recertify your income.
Somebody's just asking if there are state-specific contacts for the program that we can refer our clients to. Is there a website with this information that is updated regularly?
So I think among the HUD resources is they have a HCV homeownership dashboard, which will list each individual housing authority that has an active program. And from there, you should be able to get the contact information of those individual housing authorities.
Okay. In high cost and rural areas, the fair market rent amounts are not enough to cover a pity payment for even the cheapest homes. Is there any plan to allow for 120% of FMR to make homeownership more possible?
I know in Houston, Ellie, they expanded up to as much as 150%. So I think that's at the discretion of the housing authorities and their budget.
Yeah, there would be some exception payment standard processing that would have to be done by the housing authority. And I believe that would need to apply to both rental and homeownership vouchers without a special exception from HUD.
Okay. Our local PHA requires voucher holders to have had their voucher for at least 1 year before they can convert to homeownership. Is that permissible? There's a couple of people have asked that question.
So I would say yes, it's permissible. Often it's similar to the requirement that you lease in the jurisdiction for 1 year before porting to another jurisdiction. I believe that there could be an exception an housing authority could make if you had a homeowner-ready buyer come up on the waiting list. They could probably modify that provision of their admin plan if they wanted to, but that's a high lift. And it is geared towards people who have been successful tenants already. So.
Well, and I also think that one of the challenges is if they poured in and the housing authority that they're porting in from did not offer home ownership, my understanding is that voucher still stays with the previous housing authority until where they're porting in can absorb it. So, for example, they're moving in from Los Angeles, who doesn't offer it, but Harris County does. Until Harris County can absorb that voucher, they're bound by the other housing authority's guidelines.
Okay. The homeownership counseling program requirement, does that mean group home buyer education or one-on-one housing counseling or both?
So locally in Chicago, it's both. Both are requirements. I'm not for sure if that's the same for other agencies, but group education as well as one-on-one counseling is required.
I would say that's pretty standard across the board from other PHAs that I've talked to.
Okay. So there's been a few questions about the $2,500 special fee that HUD is offering. And I will just comment to everybody That $2,500 special fee is for a housing authority who opts to begin running a housing choice voucher for home ownership program. It is a one-time payment that is made to the PHA who decides to start a new housing choice voucher for home ownership program. Somebody asked if the program is in all states. It can be. It depends on the housing authority. I'm not sure what team this person is referring to. I'm sorry, Bruce, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
Apparently it's not in Wyoming, but it's everywhere else. I mean, it's up to the local housing authority, but every state has.
Right. Our leadership is tentative about launching housing choice voucher to home ownership. Is there anyone on your team that could meet with them to discuss the benefits, navigating logistical issues? This was at 1:30, so I'm not sure who was speaking at 1:30. I suspect it might have been Danielle.
Sorry about that. Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry, I was looking for it in the chat. I missed the reading.
It's in the Q&A. Our leadership is tentative about launching housing choice vouchers to home ownership. Is there anyone on your team that could meet with them to discuss the benefits / navigating logistical issues? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Sure. I can add my email address in the chat. If the person is still online, absolutely. You can send me an email and I can talk about the benefits of this particular program, and then maybe provide a resource at the Chicago Housing Authority for someone to meet with that's on the homeownership program.
Can the voucher be used for a habitat home? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm kind of scrolling through to see if what can we do to assist our PHA more?
Well, I think just communicate and provide information to them about how it can work. I don't know if the agency has a program. Help find out what other supports they need and work with them to find.
You know, one thing we did with the PHA is that they're nervous about it because they didn't know how like the closing process worked. You know, like I mentioned, we're HUD certified housing counselors. We know like what's going on with that, but at a PHA, if that's all they do, they may not feel comfortable. So I would, you know, offer some education on how the mortgage closing process works in your area.
Can a person who has a voucher in a different city use the voucher to buy a home? So this was specifically for Chicago, Danielle, but I think that this is a pertinent question just in general. Can somebody in one area buy a home in another area and use their voucher to go there?
For Chicago, voucher holders can only purchase within the city of Chicago guidelines. If they're looking to purchase a home, maybe in outside of that area, they will have to port their voucher to that particular housing agency. So for example, a lot of our buyers want to purchase in a suburban area, which is considered Cook County, and that's a totally separate program. So we refer them back to the Chicago Housing Authority to assist them with the porting process.
Right. So I would just say whether that's possible is, does the housing authority where the purchase will take place have a homeownership program?
Correct.
If they do, then you probably can port the voucher to that place and enroll in homeownership.
Yeah, thank you.
So a lot of folks were asking about the slides. I think that the link to the slides got put into the chat a few different times, so hopefully everybody got that. All of the slides that you saw today are in that link, so you will get the slides from everybody. This is being recorded. If you are not on our listserv, you can join our listserv. It will go out to our listserv, but if you're just looking to watch this again, we do have a YouTube channel. Search us as National Housing Resource Center. You'll find our YouTube channel and you can access all of our webinars there. This one will be there by the end of the day on Monday. Somebody would just like to know if you could talk about marketing strategies. Any of the housing counseling agencies, I think, would be good for talking about that.
Patricia has some great information on marketing strategies if she's still online, but in terms of NHS Chicago, we co-market the program at a lot of our housing fairs. In our intake process, we ask if our participants are a CHA resident, and we provide that information based on their response and intake. We also do email blasts around the program just to make sure any participants that's coming to us for financial literacy or home buying services are aware of their opportunity to use their voucher toward home ownership, as well as partnering with CHA at some of their events to make sure that this information is available. We do stories on successful home buyers through the Choose to Own program. I put a success story in the chat. So we highlight program participants on our YouTube channels, over our social media channels, and in our offices and on our website. And also with realtors, local realtors, and I should have led with that, local realtors and lenders. That's a very good way to market this program because they speak with more people that's looking to buy a home that have the voucher, but they don't know how to give them the information that's needed to get them started as well.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that. I think, like, if I were to sum up, I think today's session, so much of this is about creating partnerships. And I think for folks on the line here, like connecting with your local housing authority, some are very accessible, very open, very willing to engage with community partners and learn about the program. If they don't have one, maybe express support for starting one. And if they do, how can we generate partnerships to grow awareness of the program among participants? And locally here, our housing authority, Chicago Housing Authority, like we've in the past asked to like, hey, can you just share this information with voucher participants? And that's like tapping into a massive list of thousands of participants locally here about a housing resource fair that's coming up or about a workshop that's coming up. And we will get, you know, really good participation rates just based off of that. And I completely agree with Danielle that it's about creating that like encouraging, supportive content, having those videos, having again, that information coming from other voucher holders and those opportunities for voucher holders to connect with one another, I think is really critical.
And I think I'm going to make this the last question. Have homeowners typically been able to make their mortgage payment after the 15 years of assistance?
I can speak to that. We've checked with our local housing authorities, and about 45% of the families income out within 5 years, and that we don't know of any that have been on the program past the 15th year, which is great. That's the goal, is to have them become self-sufficient and move up and out.
And I just want to add to that. I mean, that's why homeownership is such a great tool overall, not just for Section 8, but for the whole community, because homeowners typically end up doing better. So that's why we all do what we do. And we have the same where so far no one has reached the 15-year. The next time we might have somebody is about 2 years from now, but we're working with that person now to help get more income.
Great. And Bruce, I think you're on deck to wrap it up.
Okay, wow. Well, terrific. And I love the deep knowledge that our presenters came with, but also looking at the chat that you all have with us as well. We want to have a role in trying to build these partnerships, both nationally and locally, problem solve, and try to fix this as much as we possibly can. This is obviously a huge untapped resource, and we all need to make the most of it. So thanks everybody for this great stuff. One more quick plug to, if you are not on the Leaders in Housing Counseling listserv, you should get on it. And absolutely join NHRC. I mean, this is the kind of work we do. We can't do this without you. In fact, you know, you can tell we rely heavily on the housing counseling community to make our work a success. We're fighting for housing counseling in Congress. Good news is that in a world where HUD programs are getting cut in the House, we've survived. It's not a done deal, but we didn't get any cut on the housing counseling in the House side. which is really a big deal. We've been able to maintain it for now this is the fifth year. It'll be the fifth year if this comes through. So that's very exciting. We're doing innovative work to try to plow things in the field. You do get some discounts. We have a great discount on the credit reports. There's the Savvy Online student service. We have notifications about some unusual funding opportunities. Ellie's been working on some other ones as well. So there's a little bit of value there, but the real reason to join is that this is a united effort that we need to build the kind of work that you're doing and strengthen it across the country. We are